Welcome back to our journey through the sometimes forgotten strengths of mid 20th century sociology. If you've listened to the first 6 episodes, you know we've built a toolkit that moves from systems thinking through analysis of culture, power and influence, and most recently, deviance. In that last session, we asked, what happens when a person or group steps outside the boundaries of accepted behavior? Today, we flip the coin and ask, if deviance threatens to disrupt a social system, how do communities restore or maintain order? We'll see that social control is rarely just the police or big government. You might be surprised to learn that many of the strongest forms of social control aren't enforced by police or courts at all. They're embedded in routines, relationships, and shared values. In fact, one of the great insights of mid 20th century sociology is that strong communities don't just react to deviance, they minimize it by cultivating healthy norms and bonds ahead of time. It's a layered safety net woven from expectations, peer influence, neighborhood routines, and only at the very outer ring, formal law. Understanding those layers is vital for civic leaders nurturing healthy communities. Parents hoping to raise resilient kids, business owners trying to build trustworthy workplaces, and policymakers weighing in when to regulate and when to step out of the way. That's where we're headed today. This episode is all about maintaining social order, both in big picture ways, like legal systems and institutions, and in everyday, informal ways, like family routines or neighborhood expectations. What mechanisms keep people on a certain path, and how do communities build resilience, especially in tough times? As always, if you're just joining us now, I encourage you to check out earlier episodes, especially episodes 1 and 2. We covered foundational ideas about systems thinking, feedback loops, and the relationship between individual choices and structural conditions. All of that lays the groundwork for what we're exploring today. Whether you're a teacher, a parent, a coach, a small business owner, or just someone trying to understand why your community feels cohesive or chaotic, this episode will offer some practical tools. Let's begin. As we dig into the question of how social order is maintained, we turn again to mid 20th century thinkers whose ideas, though sometimes underused today, offer powerful insights into everyday life. Walter Reckless was an American criminologist who developed containment theory in the 1960s. He argued that individuals are constantly pushed and pulled toward deviance by internal pressures like anger or anxieties, and external ones like poverty or peer pressure. What keeps them on track are containments, internal ones like self-control and conscience, and external ones like parental supervision or a structured environment. Next is Ivan Nye, also an American sociologist, who proposed a version of control theory in the 1950s. Nye identified 3 forms of control. He emphasized the family's central role in instilling conformity and convention, not through force, but through relationships. Then there's Travis Hershey, whose social bond theory remains a cornerstone of control theory today. Hershey argued that people refrain from deviance when they have strong bonds to society, characterized by 4 elements. Edwin Sutherland, a major figure in criminology, introduced differential association theory. Rather than asking why people deviate, he asked how they learn to deviate. Lastly, we include Clifford Shaw and Henry McKay, who developed social disorganization theory. Their work offered a new way of thinking about why some neighborhoods experience more social problems than others. We'll draw on all of these thinkers as we explore what social control looks like in real life and how order can be either cultivated or lost. Let's start with a working definition. Social control is the set of mechanisms, both formal and informal, that groups, communities, or societies use to promote convention and discourage deviance. Formal control includes things like laws, police, courts, and institutional rules. Informal control includes things like gossip, social disapproval, praise, social norms, recognition, and group routines. In healthy societies, most behavior is regulated informally. Think about it. Often, people don't stop at red lights because they're afraid of the police. They often stop because they've internalized that it's what everybody should do. So, social control and social order, ideally, is not so much about punishment. It's about creating conditions where rule following makes sense, feels natural, and is supported by others. Before we jump into some specific theories, it's important to note these perspectives are not necessarily mutually exclusive. In fact, in many real life situations, it's helpful to apply multiple theories to the same case. Each theory offers a different lens to peer through, and together, they can help us form a more complete picture of why people behave the way they do and how social order is maintained or disrupted. Let's walk through some core concepts and sociological tools that help explain how social control works and when it breaks down. One of the biggest misconceptions about deviant behaviors that it's always the product of broken people, of bad seeds or dysfunctional minds. Of course, sometimes that's the case. But sociologist Edwin Sutherland flipped that assumption on its head. His differential association theory proposed something surprisingly intuitive. Deviance, in part, is often learned, just like anything else. People don't necessarily wake up one day and suddenly decide to violate norms out of nowhere. They're socialized into it through repeated exposure. That means the more someone's close contacts, friends, family, mentors, engage in or excuse rule breaking, the more likely that person is to see it as normal or justified. But this theory isn't quite as simple as just pointing out peer pressure. Differential association theory holds that people are exposed to both deviant and non-deviant influences through their social interactions. What matters is the balance of these influences. When definitions favorable to deviance outweigh those unfavorable to it, individuals are more likely to adopt deviant behavior. Simply encountering some bad influences usually isn't enough to lead to deviance. Rather, the theory emphasizes the frequency, duration, intensity, and priority of our multiple associations in shaping which of these groups' influence wins out. For example, parents, church friends, school friends, neighborhood friends, social media influencers. Sutherland offers a powerful reminder. Influence is cumulative. And it works both ways, coming both from influences of deviance and influences of norms. So if we want to reduce deviance, we don't just need deterrence to deviance. We need pro-social associations that are strong, frequent, and respected. What matters is the overall balance and strength of influences. Most people are exposed to some deviant messages, but if their dominant associations support convention, they're less likely to engage in deviant behavior. Here's an example of how to use this insight. When you're mentoring youth, parenting, or even choosing your own peer group, ask, who are the most influential voices in this person's life? And what behaviors and attitudes are they modeling? How can they be exposed to pro-social or positive influences with more duration, frequency, and intensity than these other influences? Next, let's zoom out and look at the community level. Sociologists Clifford Shaw and Henry McKay, working in Chicago in the early 20th century, noticed something odd. The highest crime rates weren't in the poorest neighborhoods, but in neighborhoods with the most turnover. Their social disorganization theory helps explain why. In places where people are constantly coming and going, where most property is rental, and where local institutions are weak, something essential gets lost: informal oversight. Shaw and McKay show us that environments matter. Without everyday social routines that come with more stability, formal control, like policing, becomes the only line of defense. And by that point, it's often too late. Think about it. When neighbors don't know each other, who keeps an eye on the kids? Who checks in when a garage door is left open all night? Or when a young person starts hanging out with a risky crowd? Without that web of watchful familiarity, people retreat indoors. Trust erodes even more, and rule breaking becomes easier, not necessarily because people have changed, but because no one's watching. A systems thinker would see a feedback loop here. Picture a neighborhood where the faces change every year. Families moving in and out, trying to get by. The school struggles with teacher turnover. Parents work long hours or multiple jobs. A few older residents usually try to keep things running by organizing block cleanups and watching out for the kids, but it's hard to keep momentum and build relationships when no one stays too long. When trouble starts, graffiti, drug use, or fights after school, there's no existing informal infrastructure to help with a coordinated response. Not because no one cares, but because the social and informational ties that connect people are so weak. So, how do people resist deviance, especially when the environment isn't ideal? That's where Walter Reckless's containment theory comes in. He imagined two circles of protection around each person, inner and outer containments. Inner containments refer to the internal psychological and moral forces that help an individual resist deviant behavior, even in the face of external pressure or opportunity. It includes personal traits such as a well-developed conscience, a positive self-concept, a strong sense of responsibility, and a commitment to future goals. These internal buffers provide a sense of identity and purpose that discourages engagement in norm-violating behavior. Reckless viewed inner containment as the first line of defense against deviance. A person with strong inner containment doesn't just fear consequences, they genuinely believe in the value of conformity and feel that deviating would betray who they are or who they want to become. This makes inner containments especially important for long-term self-directed stability. So, inner containments are psychological. It's your sense of self-respect, moral compass, and future orientation. It's what tells a person, that's not who I want to be. Just a note, though, our inner containments are likely to be outcomes of previous interactions and how and what we've been raised or taught to be. Outer containment, then, refers to the external social structures and relationships that provide support, supervision, and reinforcement of conventional behavior. This includes the presence of effective authority figures like parents, teachers, or mentors, strong community institutions, clearly defined rules and boundaries, and consistent expectations. Ideally, outer containments offer a framework of accountability and belonging that reinforces inner values. So while inner containment deals with internal motivations, outer containment is about the social environment. Are there people who notice? Are there routines that support good decisions? Are there trusted peers or others who model and reward responsible behavior? Outer containment is particularly crucial during developmental stages or times of transition in our lives when inner containments may be under strain. Reckless pointed out that deviance tends to occur when one or both of these rings weaken. For example, someone with strong inner values might still go off track if they feel completely unsupported or unaccountable. Likewise, a person who's constantly monitored but lacks self-worth or long-term goals might just become sneaky. What makes this idea so useful is that it invites us to look at both the personal and the social. People need moral grounding and social environmental scaffolding. Strengthening one helps, but strengthening both is far more effective. Let's turn now to control theory and two key thinkers, Ivan Nye and Travis Hershey. Ivan Nye introduced the idea that control comes in three forms. Direct control, enforced through rules and consequences like curfews or punishment. Indirect control, which is based on emotional attachments. For example, we behave a certain way because we don't want to disappoint those we love. That internal control, which is our internalized sense of right and wrong, shaped by upbringing and social norms. Nye especially emphasized that families are central to all three. A strong family base doesn't just enforce discipline, it builds relationships that make kids care about behaving well, and it also cultivates internal controls. Travis Hershey picked up this thread and developed it further in his well-known social bond theory. He suggested that people refrain from deviance when they are strongly bonded to society through four key connections. Let's walk through the four elements Travis Hershey identified, these social ties that help keep people connected to conventional behavior. As we go through this list, think about a friend or loved one who you might want to support in avoiding a certain behavior. The first is attachment. This refers to emotional closeness with others, especially family, friends, mentors, teachers, or peers. Typically, those who model the pro-social, conventional, or healthy behavior. When someone cares about what others think of them and feels a connection, they're less likely to want to let down those people. Second, commitment. This is about having something to lose. When people are invested in future goals, a college degree, a job opportunity, a scholarship, they're less likely to take risks that might jeopardize those investments. It's not just about a fear of consequences, but about protecting what one has worked towards. Third is involvement. The more time someone spends in structured, conventional activities like sports, clubs, part-time jobs, the less time and opportunity they have for getting into trouble. Involvement creates a routine that fills up the day in ways that reduce exposure to deviant options. And finally, belief. This means accepting the legitimacy of society's rules. When someone believes the laws are fair or that moral standards matter, they're more likely to follow them. But when belief in those rules weakens, so can the bond that holds behavior in check. Each of these bonds acts like a drop of glue. The more of them you have, the more tightly you're held to the social fabric. Lose enough of them, and the whole sheet begins to peel away. What makes Hershey's framework so elegant is that it provides actionable leverage points. Want to prevent deviance? Strengthen attachment. Make sure people have and feel they have something to lose. Fill their calendars with meaningful involvement, and nurture shared belief systems. Each of these bonds is a buffer against the pull of deviance. So let's take a step back and pull these threads together. One way to think about social control is through 3 concentric circles, or layers, that work together to guide behavior and maintain order. In the innermost circle, we find personal conscience, internalized value, and close emotional attachments. This is where self-regulation happens. People behave appropriately because they've come to believe in certain standards, and they don't want to let down those they care about. The middle circle includes community-level supports. Schools, faith communities, youth programs, sports teams, friend networks, and neighbors who look out for each other. These are the informal institutions that quietly shape expectations and provide guidance day to day. And in the outermost circle, we have formal systems of control, laws, policies, police, and courts. These kick in when the other layers fall short. In a well-functioning group or society, most issues are handled within the first 2 circles. A friend steps in, a teacher notices a change and makes a call, a mentor or role model offers some advice. These are low-cost, high-trust responses that prevent small problems from ever becoming large ones. But when those inner layers weaken or were never strong to begin with, when relationships with conventional others fray or communities are fragmented, the burdens shift outward. Suddenly, schools depend on security officers rather than peer role models. Neighbors call the police instead of talking to one another. Such reliance on formal controls is not only less efficient, it's often costly and unsustainable. So building or preserving those inner layers of social order isn't just about tradition or nostalgia. It's strategic. It's how relative freedom and functionality are maintained, even when external social pressures mount. If something here sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to dig deeper. Some of these concepts may sound, at first glance, like they're just about peer pressure or having a good conscience, but they are much more complex than I've had time to describe, and they're worth exploring more. As usual, let's bring this all to life with a case example. Hannah and Michael Lewis live in a modest, high-turnover neighborhood on the edge of a small city. The houses are tightly packed, the street is busy, and families frequently come and go. They're drawn by affordable rents, but are often gone within the year. There aren't many long-time residents, and what's more, the local school has a high staff turnover. Michael and Hannah have 2 children, and their oldest has just started middle school. Over the past few months, they've noticed subtle changes in him, less interest in school, more time alone in his room, and a new group of friends whose influence seems a bit concerning. But, it's that age. One evening, after a tense argument about curfew, Hannah and Michael sit down together, not just to vent, but to think things through. They recall a workshop Hannah attended at the community center where the speaker talked about social bonds and community connections and how the informal neighborhood environment can have a big impact on kids. Instead of cracking down with even harsher punishments, Hannah and Michael decided to first try something different. She gets out her old notes from the presentation and finds this section on building up the 4 elements from Hershey's theory. They made a plan for each. For attachment, every Tuesday became walk and talk night around the school track. Phones off, the Lewis kids rotated turns. Their oldest opened up more on lap 2 than he ever did at the dinner table. For commitment, they posted a giant poster of their oldest child's dream, opening a small engine repair shop, and listed the steps. Save $300 for used tools. Shadow Mr. Delgado at the lawnmower shop on Saturdays. For involvement, Michael revived a dusty acoustic guitar and joined the church youth band so that their oldest could tag along rather than roam the strip mall parking lot. And for belief, Hannah turned family movie night into story safari with their youngest, pausing the film to ask, what rule did the hero break, and why did we cheer or wince? Eventually, even their oldest child chimed in on debates. Drawing on Sutherland's differential association theory, they gently limit his time with peers they're concerned about. Not always through bans necessarily, but by shifting his schedule and inviting new families over. They also get involved at school, trying to foster some familiarity with teachers and staff. But the Lewises realized they couldn't do containments alone. So Hannah invited 2 neighbors for Saturday coffee on the porch. The next week, there were 6 chairs, and then 10. Within a month, parents organized a tool lending shed and a shared WhatsApp group that lit up whenever a porch light burned out or a bike went missing. Over time, those threads strengthened. Turnover actually slowed. It wasn't magic, and there were still challenges, but 2 years in, things felt different. There was more eye contact on the sidewalk, more greetings across porches. Their oldest, now in high school, had found a small but solid group of friends and was starting to tutor younger kids after school. From a systems perspective, what Hannah and Michael did wasn't just good parenting. It was infrastructure building at multiple levels. They reinforced weak bonds, restored informal controls, and strengthened the system itself. And they did it without more laws or stricter enforcement, just through connection and intention. Wrapping up, here are some questions to help you see the relevance of these concepts for your own life. Think about Hershey's elements: attachment, commitment, involvement, and belief. Can you recall a time when one of those bonds helped you make a better decision, or when its absence made things harder? Number 2, have you ever experienced a time when either your inner controls or outer controls seemed weakened, and you were grateful that the other layer was there to keep you on track toward your goals? How might this experience help you to better prepare for the future, or to help a friend or family member who might come across such a time in their life? Number 3, have you ever noticed someone being exposed to both positive and negative influences through peers, media, or family, and saw which side won out? How would you explain it? And finally, have you ever lived in or visited a neighborhood where people really watched out for one another, or where no one seemed to care? How did that shape how people felt comfortable behaving? Thanks for joining me for this episode on maintaining social order. I hope it's helped you see just how many layers of influence, internal and external, formal and informal, shape the ways people behave and the stability of the communities we live in. In our next and final episode, we'll try something a little different. We'll do a kind of inventory, a review of key ideas from the series so far, not just as abstract theories and concepts, but as practical tools you can carry into your own thinking and community life. Then we'll put you in the driver's seat with a challenge, a fictional case study that invites you to try your hand at analysis. You'll draw on everything you've learned, from feedback loops and social norms to culture, deviance, and social bonds. So if you've been listening all along, or even if you're just joining us now, Episode 8 is your chance to synthesize, reflect, and apply. I hope you'll tune in. See you in Episode 8.